Chad's footsteps echoed through the silent cemetery as he made his way past rows of weathered tombstones, the moon casting eerie shadows across the ground. It was late, far later than he had intended to be out, but his curiosity had led him here, drawn by the rumors that surrounded the old graveyard. As he wandered deeper into the heart of the cemetery, a chill crept up his spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the only sound was the distant hoot of an owl. Just as Chad was about to turn back, something caught his eye, a flicker of movement among the tombstones. Heart racing, he approached cautiously, his footsteps muffled by the thick grass. What he saw next sent a shiver down his spine. A figure stood among the graves, cloaked in shadow, their features obscured by darkness. Chad's breath caught in his throat as he watched, frozen in place, unsure whether to flee or confront the mysterious stranger. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling with fear. There was no response, only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. With a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, Chad realized that he was not alone in the cemetery, and whoever, or whatever, was lurking in the darkness was watching his every move. Gathering his courage, Chad took a step forward, determined to uncover the truth behind the strange happenings in the cemetery. But as he drew closer, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but an icy chill in the night air. Determined to unravel the mystery, Chad returned to the cemetery night after night, each time venturing deeper into its shadowy depths. But the more he searched, the more elusive the truth became, and he found himself caught in a web of deception and intrigue. Strange occurrences plagued Chad at every turn. Whispers in the darkness, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures, and the feeling of being watched wherever he went. And as the days turned into weeks, he began to fear for his sanity, haunted by the relentless pursuit of the unknown. But Chad refused to give up, driven by an insatiable desire to uncover the secrets that lay buried beneath the surface of the cemetery. And so, he delved deeper into the darkness, his quest for answers leading him down a path fraught with danger and uncertainty. Then, one fateful night, Chad stumbled upon a hidden mausoleum, concealed beneath a tangled thicket of thorns. Intrigued, he pushed aside the overgrown vines and stepped inside, his heart pounding with anticipation. What he found inside took his breath away. A chamber filled with ancient artifacts and crumbling scrolls, each one offering tantalizing clues to the cemetery's dark past. And as Chad pieced together the fragments of the puzzle, he uncovered a truth more horrifying than he could have ever imagined. For hidden beneath the cemetery lay a long-forgotten secret, a secret that had been buried for centuries, waiting to be unearthed by those brave enough to seek it out. And as Chad stared into the abyss, he realized that some mysteries were better left undiscovered, for the truth could be far more terrifying than anything he had ever imagined. With trembling hands, Chad pored over the ancient scrolls, deciphering the cryptic messages that hinted at a dark ritual performed centuries ago. As he read on, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, painting a grim picture of a pact made with dark forces that had cursed the land upon which the cemetery stood. The more Chad learned, the more he realized the danger he was in. The whispers in the night, the shadowy figures, all were manifestations of the malevolent presence that lingered within the cemetery, waiting to claim its next victim. But Chad refused to be cowed by fear. Armed with the knowledge he had uncovered, he vowed to put an end to the curse once and for all, even if it meant risking his own life in the process. As he delved deeper into the darkness, Chad discovered the key to breaking the curse, a powerful incantation hidden within the pages of an ancient tome. With each word he spoke, the air crackled with energy, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. And then, in a blinding flash of light, the curse was broken, and the cemetery was bathed in an eerie silence. The whispers ceased, the shadowy figures vanished, and peace was restored to the land once more. But as Chad stood amid the ruins of the ancient mausoleum, he knew that his journey was far from over. For although the curse had been lifted, The memories of the darkness that had consumed the cemetery would haunt him forever. And as he turned to leave, he whispered a silent vow to never forget the price of seeking the truth, a price paid in blood and sacrifice, in the depths of the cemetery's darkest secrets. In the heart of a small town nestled among the rolling hills, there lay an old cemetery, its gravestones weathered and moss-covered, bearing witness to centuries of memories and forgotten souls. It was here that George found himself one autumn evening, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity that tugged at his senses like an unseen force. George, a reserved and introspective man, often sought solace in the quietude of nature. Yet, as he wandered among the tombstones, a chill ran down his spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the graves, and George's steps quickened involuntarily. Just as he was about to turn back, a voice echoed through the stillness, causing him to freeze in his tracks. "Who goes there?" The voice was low and gravelly, sending shivers down George's spine. He turned to see an old man emerging from the shadows, his features obscured by the dim light. I'm sorry," George stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave right away." But the old man's gaze held him in place. "No need to leave so soon, lad. I could use some company." Reluctantly, George approached, his heart pounding in his chest. The old man introduced himself as Ezekiel, the caretaker of the cemetery, and invited George to sit beside him on a weathered bench. As they talked, George learned that Ezekiel had tended to the graves for decades, his wrinkled hands carrying the weight of countless stories and secrets. But as the night wore on, George sensed a darkness lurking beneath Ezekiel's genial facade, a shadowy past that he seemed reluctant to share. Despite the unease gnawing at him, George found himself drawn back to the cemetery day after day, each visit deepening his bond with Ezekiel. Yet, beneath their conversations about life and death, George sensed a growing tension, a feeling that something sinister lurked just beyond the veil of darkness. One moonlit night, as George wandered alone among the tombstones, he stumbled upon a hidden crypt, its entrance obscured by overgrown vines. Intrigued, he pushed aside the foliage and descended into the darkness below. The air grew colder with each step, and George's heart raced with anticipation. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he was met with a sight that chilled him to the core. Rows upon rows of empty coffins, their lids ajar as if beckoning him closer. Before he could react, a hand clamped down on his shoulder, sending a shockwave of fear through his body. It was Ezekiel, his eyes ablaze with a feverish intensity. "What have you done?" George gasped, his voice trembling with dread. But Ezekiel only laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. "You were never meant to find this place, George. But now that you have, there's no turning back." With a swift motion, Ezekiel pushed George into one of the empty coffins and slammed the lid shut, sealing him in darkness. Panic surged through George's veins as he pounded against the wooden confines, his screams echoing through the empty crypt. Hours passed like an eternity, and just as George's hope began to wane, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. The lid of the coffin creaked open, and a shaft of light pierced the darkness, illuminating Ezekiel's twisted smile. "Welcome to your new home, George," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "Here, among the forgotten souls of the cemetery, you will find your eternal rest." George's mind raced with terror as he struggled to comprehend the gravity of his situation. Trapped in the confines of the coffin, surrounded by the eerie stillness of the crypt, he felt a sense of dread unlike anything he had ever experienced before. With trembling hands, George searched for any means of escape, but the walls of the coffin offered no solace, closing in around him like the jaws of a merciless beast. His breath came in ragged gasps as he fought against the suffocating darkness, each moment stretching into an eternity of torment. But amidst the despair, a spark of determination ignited within George's soul. With newfound resolve, he pushed aside the paralyzing fear and focused on the task at hand: survival. Groping blindly in the darkness, George's fingers brushed against a small metallic object nestled in the corner of the coffin. With trembling hands, he grasped it tightly, his heart pounding with anticipation. It was a rusted nail, sharp and jagged against his skin, but to George, it represented his only hope of escape. Summoning every ounce of strength within him, George began to chip away at the wood, each strike of the nail echoing through the silent chamber like a thunderclap in the night. The hours passed in a blur of relentless effort, his hands raw and bleeding, but still he persisted, driven by an unyielding resolve to break free from his prison. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, George felt the wood give way beneath his relentless assault. With a final, desperate lunge, he tore through the last remaining barrier and emerged into the cold embrace of the crypt. But as he stumbled into the dim light, George's heart sank at the sight that greeted him. The crypt lay empty, its walls devoid of life, and Ezekiel was nowhere to be seen. With a sinking feeling of dread, George realized that he was truly alone in the darkness, his only companions the silent specters of the cemetery. But even as fear threatened to consume him, a glimmer of hope flickered in the depths of his soul. For George knew that as long as he drew breath, there was still a chance to escape the clutches of the graveyard and emerge into the light once more. With newfound determination, he set out into the night, his footsteps echoing through the silent rows of tombstones as he embarked on a journey to reclaim his freedom from the depths of the cemetery's ancient embrace. As George ventured deeper into the labyrinthine paths of the cemetery, every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking menace. Every whisper of the wind carried the echoes of unseen terrors. Yet he pressed on, driven by a fierce determination to defy the darkness that threatened to consume him. With each step, George's resolve grew stronger, fueled by the memory of his confinement in the crypt and the chilling realization of Ezekiel's true nature. He knew that he could not allow himself to become another forgotten soul in this unhallowed ground. As dawn approached, casting a faint glimmer of light upon the horizon, George stumbled upon the entrance to the cemetery. With a surge of hope, he broke into a run, his heart pounding with the promise of freedom just beyond his reach. But as he reached the iron gates, a chilling voice pierced the silence, freezing him in his tracks. It was Ezekiel, his form looming like a specter in the dim light, his eyes ablaze with a feverish madness. "You cannot escape, George," he hissed, his voice echoing through the stillness of the morning. "This cemetery is my domain, and you are but a trespasser in the realm of the dead." But George refused to yield to the darkness that threatened to consume him. With a defiant roar, he hurled himself at Ezekiel, his fists pounding against the old man's frail form with a fury born of desperation. Their struggle raged on amidst the silent gravestones, the echoes of their battle reverberating through the empty expanse of the cemetery. But in the end, it was George who emerged victorious, his determination and courage prevailing against the darkness that sought to claim him. As Ezekiel lay defeated at his feet, George cast one final glance back at the cemetery, its shadowy depths fading into the light of the dawn. With a weary yet triumphant smile, he stepped beyond the iron gates, leaving behind the haunting whispers of the graveyard and embracing the promise of a new beginning. For George had conquered the darkness that lurked within the depths of the cemetery, emerging from the depths of despair to embrace the light of hope and freedom once more. And though the memories of his harrowing ordeal would linger in his mind like a lingering shadow, he knew that he would never again be shackled by the chains of fear and despair.